This story is titled, My Fiancé Lied About Being Debt-Free, then Tried to Use My Savings to Pay Off His Loans, so I Canceled the Wedding. Hi, I'm Lily, a 29-year-old storyteller from the United States. I've always been a firm believer in trust and transparency in relationships, but this story is about the time those values were tested in the most heartbreaking way. Buckle up, because this one's a roller coaster of betrayal, revelation, and reclaiming my power. When I first met David, everything about him felt perfect. He was charming, successful, and attentive, everything I thought I wanted in a partner. We met at a friend's engagement party, and from the moment we locked eyes, it was like we were in our own little bubble. David was a 31-year-old financial advisor, which only added to his appeal. He had this aura of stability and confidence that made me feel like I was finally with someone I could build a future with. Our relationship moved quickly. Within a year, we were engaged. David proposed during a romantic dinner at our favorite restaurant, slipping the ring onto my finger as he talked about our future, our dream home, the vacations we'd take, and the family we'd build together. I was over the moon, convinced I'd found my soulmate. I'd always been careful with my finances. Growing up in a middle-class household, I learned early on the value of saving for the future. By the time I was 29, I'd built a solid savings account with nearly $50,000, a safety net I was incredibly proud of. David knew about my savings, and he often praised me for being so responsible. He claimed he was the same way, always emphasizing how debt-free and financially secure he was. At first, I had no reason to doubt him. David drove a nice car, lived in a sleek apartment, and wore expensive suits. He seemed to have his life together. But as we started planning the wedding, little cracks in his story began to appear. It started small. One day, while we were discussing wedding expenses, David casually mentioned that we should dip into my savings to cover some of the costs. "It's just temporary," he said with a charming smile. "I'll pay you back as soon as my next commission comes in." I hesitated. I wasn't opposed to sharing financial responsibilities, but something about his request didn't sit right with me. "Why not use your savings instead?" I asked. David's expression faltered for a split second before he recovered. "I have some investments tied up right now," he explained. "It's just easier to use your account for now." I let it go, convincing myself I was overthinking things. After all, we were about to get married. What was his was mine, and vice versa, right? But as the weeks went on, David's requests became more frequent and urgent. He started suggesting we combine our finances before the wedding, emphasizing how much easier it would make everything. That was when my instincts started screaming at me. Something wasn't adding up. David, who had always presented himself as financially independent, was suddenly pushing for access to my savings. It didn't feel like the man I thought I knew. One night, I decided to have an honest conversation with him. We were sitting on the couch, wedding magazines spread out on the coffee table, when I turned to him and asked, "David, is there something you're not telling me about your finances?" His reaction was immediate and defensive. "What do you mean? I've been completely transparent with you." "I don't know," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "It just feels like you're relying on my savings a lot. I thought you were debt-free." David laughed nervously, brushing off my concerns. "Lily, you're overthinking this. I'm just trying to make things easier for us." But I wasn't convinced. That night, after he fell asleep, I did something I never thought I'd do. I went through some of his paperwork. What I found left me shaken. Hidden among his neatly organized files were credit card statements, personal loan agreements, and overdue notices. David wasn't debt-free. He was drowning in nearly $100,000 of debt. When I discovered the truth about David's financial situation, my heart sank. The man who had painted himself as financially secure and responsible was living a lie, and he'd been keeping it from me this entire time. It wasn't just the debt that hurt. It was the deceit. The next morning, I confronted him. I held up the stack of papers I'd found and demanded an explanation. David's face turned pale, and for the first time, I saw real panic in his eyes. "I can explain," he stammered, but his words felt hollow. He tried to spin it as a temporary setback, claiming he'd made some bad investments in the past, but was on his way to paying it all off. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe that the man I loved wasn't capable of lying to me so blatantly. But the evidence was right there in front of me. David had hidden a massive part of his life from me, and he'd only come clean because I caught him. "I can't believe you lied to me," I said, my voice shaking. "We were supposed to be partners, David. How could you keep something like this from me?" He reached for my hand, his tone desperate. Lily, I didn't want to scare you off. I knew how much financial stability meant to you, and I didn't want you to think I wasn't good enough. His words tugged at my heart, but they didn't erase the betrayal. You didn't give me the chance to decide for myself, I said, pulling my hand away. You took that choice away from me. David begged me to forgive him, promising to come clean about everything and work on paying off his debts. He even suggested we go to financial counseling together, but I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just about money. It was about trust, or the lack of it. As the days went on, I tried to process everything. Part of me wanted to believe that David's intentions had been good, that he'd lied out of fear rather than malice. But another part of me couldn't ignore the red flags. One evening, as I was going through our wedding plans, I noticed another inconsistency. The deposit for the venue, which David had claimed to have paid, hadn't gone through. When I asked him about it, he shrugged it off, saying there must have been a mix-up with his bank. That was the breaking point for me. I realized that David wasn't just lying about his past, he was actively manipulating me in the present. The more I uncovered about David's financial situation, the more I realized how deeply his lies ran. He had maxed out multiple credit cards, taken out high-interest loans, and even borrowed money from friends and family without paying them back. It was like peeling back layers of an onion, each one revealing a new, ugly truth. I felt like a fool. Here I was, planning a future with someone who had built our relationship on a foundation of deceit. Every time I thought I had the full picture, another lie would surface. But the final straw came when I checked my savings account. I had set up alerts for any withdrawals, and one morning I woke up to a notification that a large sum of money had been transferred out of my account. I froze. I hadn't authorized any transactions. My heart raced as I logged into my account to confirm what I already knew. Someone had stolen from me. It didn't take long to figure out who the culprit was. David had somehow gained access to my account and transferred $10,000 to his own. I confronted him immediately. "How could you do this to me?" I demanded, holding up my phone to show him the transaction. David didn't even try to deny it. "I was going to pay it back," he said, his voice calm like he hadn't just committed a massive betrayal. "I just needed it to cover some debts before the wedding." "Before the wedding?" I repeated, incredulous. "Do you even hear yourself, David? You stole from me! How can you possibly think I'd still want to marry you after this?" He tried to turn it around on me, accusing me of overreacting and not being supportive enough of his financial struggles. "If you really loved me, you'd understand that I'm doing this for us," he said, as if his actions were some twisted form of devotion. But I was done with the lies, the manipulation, and the emotional blackmail. I canceled the wedding that very day. David didn't take it well. He accused me of ruining his life, of giving up on him when he needed me the most. But I stood my ground. "You ruined this yourself, David," I said. "I'm just choosing not to be a part of it anymore." In the weeks that followed, I focused on picking up the pieces of my life. Canceling the wedding was a logistical nightmare, calling vendors, notifying guests, and dealing with the embarrassment of explaining what had happened. But as painful as it was, I knew I'd made the right decision. David's betrayal had shattered my trust, but it also taught me a valuable lesson about the importance of listening to my instincts and setting boundaries. I reported the unauthorized transaction to my bank and was able to recover the stolen money. I also cut off all contact with David, blocking him on every platform and refusing to engage with his attempts to win me back. Looking back, I'm grateful I found out the truth before it was too late. Marrying David would have been a disaster, and I shudder to think about the financial and emotional toll it would have taken on me. To anyone out there who might be in a similar situation, let me say this. Trust your gut. If something feels off, don't ignore it. And most importantly, don't let anyone make you feel guilty for standing up for yourself. Thank you for watching my story. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share, and subscribe for more. Until next time.